April 14th, 1945, 14:30 hours. Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, Reims, France. The war room is quiet in the way only command centers get quiet when something has gone wrong. Not the productive silence of men working, the heavy silence of men waiting. Maps cover every wall. Blue markers show Allied positions pushing deep into Germany. Red markers show what remains of the Wehrmacht. And somewhere between those colors, in the gray space of active combat, a three-star general has vanished. General Dwight David Eisenhower sits at his desk, 54 years old, Supreme Commander of all Allied forces in Europe, the man responsible for the largest military operation in human history. Right now he is holding a radio handset so tightly his knuckles have gone white. The ashtray in front of him overflows. He has been chain-smoking for 3 hours. The casualty reports from the morning sit unread on the corner of his desk. He cannot focus on numbers right now, cannot think about the hundreds of Americans who died in the last 72 hours pushing toward Berlin. Because somewhere out there in a war zone where men are still killing each other every single day, one of his army commanders is missing. Eisenhower presses the transmit button one more time. George, if you are listening, 400,000 men are waiting for orders.
Where are you? Static. Just static. He releases the button, sets the handset down carefully, looks at the man standing across from him. General Walter Bedell Smith, Chief of Staff, the man who handles everything Eisenhower cannot. Smith's face is pale. He has been coordinating the search for 8 hours. 8 hours of radio calls to every forward command post. 8 hours of checking with air reconnaissance. 8 hours of nothing.
Smith places a single sheet of paper on Eisenhower's desk. A position report from 11th Armored Division. Forward observers spotted a three-star general's jeep at their position near Chemnitz. 1400 hours, 30 minutes ago. Eisenhower pulls out his situation map, spreads it across the desk. His finger traces from 3rd Army headquarters near Frankfurt, northeast, past 12th Corps positions, past the forward edge of battle, all the way to Chemnitz near the Czech border. His finger stops, 300 miles. He looks up at Smith. The question does not need to be asked aloud, but Smith answers it anyway. Through active combat zones, no flight plan, no convoy authorization, no route clearance. Sir, we do not know how he got there. 300 miles in 8 hours, through territory where American and German forces are engaged in daily firefights, through roads that may or may not be secure, through sectors where artillery is still falling, through a war zone, 40 miles per hour average speed. That is what the math says. 40 miles per hour through combat terrain where armored divisions are averaging 12 miles per day. Eisenhower stands, walks to the large map on the wall, studies the space between Frankfurt and Chemnitz, sees multiple German defensive positions marked in red, retreating Wehrmacht units, destroyed bridges, cratered roads, 2 entire corps' operational areas belonging to 3rd Army's front line, and Lieutenant General George Smith Patton Jr. somehow moved through all of it without telling anyone where he was going. The door opens, another staff officer, another report. The sighting has been confirmed. Patton's command vehicle was positively identified at 11th Armored Division Forward Command Post. The division commander personally verified it. Patton was there, stayed for 20 minutes, asked about their advance toward the Czech border, then departed. Did not say where he was going next. Eisenhower closes his eyes, takes a breath, opens them again. Get me Bradley on the phone and find out if 3rd Army headquarters has any idea where their commander is right now. He turns back to the map, stares at those 300 miles. 8 hours earlier, Patton's jeep sat outside 3rd Army headquarters. Engine still warm. Driver's seat empty. No note, no itinerary, no filed movement plan. Just gone. Nobody saw him leave. Nobody knew his destination. The most famous American general in Europe simply disappeared into a combat zone. And that Eisenhower knows is not even the strangest part. The strangest part is what happened after Patton arrived at 11th Armored Division. The division had been fighting for every mile in that sector, averaging 12 miles per day for the past week. Slow, grinding advances against determined German resistance until Patton showed up. Within 6 hours of his visit, 11th Armored pushed forward 15 miles. Took 2 towns the staff said would require another week. Reported enemy resistance collapsing faster than intelligence predicted, and their casualty rate dropped by 30% compared to the previous 3 days. 1 visit from their army commander, 15 miles gained. The division is now 50 miles beyond where Schaeff projected they would be by next week. They are at the Czech border. Want to know why? Because their army commander showed up and told them they could do it. Eisenhower sits back down at his desk. The radio handset sits silent. Somewhere out there, Patton is already moving to his next destination, already planning his next unauthorized visit to the front lines, already violating every protocol that exists to keep general officers alive. And somewhere out there, American soldiers are fighting harder because they know their commander might appear out of nowhere. Smith breaks the silence. Sir, 12th Army Group wants to know if we should order him back. Eisenhower stares at the map. Order him back from where exactly? They do not even know his current position. By the time they locate him, he will be somewhere else. And ordering him back means pulling him away from whatever he is doing that makes his units advance faster than any other army in the European theater. Get him on the radio, Eisenhower says. I do not care how you do it. Find Patton, now. Smith nods, leaves the room. Eisenhower is alone with the maps and the casualty reports and the knowledge that somewhere in the chaos of the final month of the European war, his best field commander is playing reconnaissance scout. 1630 hours. 2 hours of searching. Radio operators at Schaeff contact every forward unit in 3rd Army's sector. The 11th Armored Division establishes contact through their communications net, patches it through to Rheims. Patton is at a battalion command post, 2 miles from active German positions. Eisenhower takes the handset. George, I have your 3rd Army headquarters on one line and Bradley on another line. No one knew where you were for 8 hours. A crackle of static. Then Patton's voice comes through, calm, unhurried, like this is the most normal conversation in the world. I was visiting my forward elements, Ike. That is what an army commander does. Eisenhower's grip tightens on the handset. Your forward elements are 300 miles from your headquarters, George. You crossed through 2 core sectors without notifying their commanders. You did not file movement authorization with 12th Army Group. You did not tell your own Chief of Staff where you were going. The situation is fluid. I cannot push paper every time I want to see my men in contact with the enemy. This is not about paperwork. You are the 3rd Army commander. If something happens to you, your entire army loses command continuity. You have course commanders. They visit forward units. You command from a position where you can actually control 3 corps and 400,000 men. There is a pause. When Patton speaks again, his voice is firm, certain. My men fight better when they know their army commander is up there with them. I saw that battalion take a town this afternoon. Watched it happen. You cannot see that from a headquarters 300 miles back. I need you commanding an army, George, not a battalion. And I need my army to know I am with them. Eisenhower can hear Bradley on another line, furious. Can imagine the conversation happening right now at 12th Army Group headquarters. The press pool is already asking questions. How do we explain that 3rd Army's commanding general went missing for 8 hours in enemy territory? Bradley is furious, Eisenhower says. Schaeff operations thought we had a command crisis. The press is asking questions. Tell them I was doing my job. There is an edge to Patton's voice now. The 11th Armored is 50 miles beyond where your staff predicted they would be next week. They are at the Czech border. Want to know why? Because their army commander showed up and told them they could do it. Eisenhower closes his eyes, takes a breath. George, you are 59 years old. You have led this army from Normandy to the Czech border. You have commanded in more combat operations than almost any American general alive. Do not throw it all away by getting yourself killed in some random firefight because you wanted to sightsee at the front. I am not sightseeing, Ike. Patton's voice is quiet now. I am leading. The radio goes silent for a moment. Then Eisenhower speaks, his voice cold and formal. You will receive an official written reprimand for unauthorized movement into combat zones. Is that understood? Understood, sir. The transmission ends. Eisenhower hands the radio back to the communications officer, turns to Smith. Put a note in his file. Official reprimand for unauthorized forward movement during active combat operations. Smith picks up his pen, hesitates. Will it stop him, sir? Eisenhower looks back at the map, at the position markers showing 3rd Army's incredible advance across Germany, deeper than any other Allied army, faster than any projection, lower casualties than the staff predicted. No, he says, but at least it is documented when he does it again. 2 weeks earlier, late March 1945, 3rd Army headquarters, Frankfurt, Germany, Lieutenant General George Smith Patton Jr. stands in front of a map of Central Europe. 59 years old, tall, ramrod straight posture, 2 ivory-handled revolvers on his belt, the image of an old cavalry officer, which is exactly what he is, except cavalry does not exist anymore. Now he commands tanks, 400,000 men, 3 corps, the most mobile, aggressive army in the European theater. He has spent 30 years preparing for this war, 30 years studying tactics at the Command and General Staff College, reading Clausewitz and Napoleon and Caesar, learning how armor moves, how infantry fights, how artillery supports. 30 years training for the moment when everything he learned would be tested against the best army Europe had ever produced. And now in April 1945, that war is ending. The Germans are collapsing, the Allies are driving toward Berlin from the west, the Soviets from the east. Every day brings news of another city liberated, another German unit surrendering, another mile gained. Every day the war becomes more certain to end, and Patton cannot stop thinking about what that means. He has prepared for 3 decades to fight this war. What happens when men like him are no longer needed? When the shooting stops and the planning begins for whatever comes after, when generals become administrators instead of warriors? His greatest fear is not dying in combat. His greatest fear is watching this war end from a headquarters tent 300 miles behind the lines while his soldiers do the dying, becoming an old man in a clean uniform, giving orders from safety, disconnected from the reality his men face every single day. He remembers France in 1918, the First World War. He was a young tank commander then, 32 years old, led the first American tank units into combat at Saint-Mihiel, saw men die because their commanders were too far back to understand what was happening at the front, saw good soldiers follow bad orders because the generals giving those orders had no idea what the battlefield actually looked like. He swore then that if he ever commanded an army, he would never make that mistake. He would be where his soldiers are. That is not how Eisenhower sees it, not how Bradley sees it, not how any of the staff officers at SHAEF see it. They believe in system, in structure, in commanders who command from headquarters where they can see the whole battlefield, where they can coordinate multiple corps, where they can make decisions based on complete information instead of what they witness at one small section of the front. They are not wrong. Patton knows they are not wrong. An army commander cannot be everywhere, cannot see everything, cannot make decisions for 400,000 men based on what one battalion is doing. That is not how armies work. Armies need hierarchy, need communication, need commanders who trust their subordinates to execute orders while they maintain the larger vision. But there is something those staff officers do not understand, something that does not appear in any manual or doctrine or after-action report. When soldiers see their commanding general at the front line, everything changes, not because the general personally makes a difference in that specific fight, not because his presence alters the tactical situation, but because it tells every soldier in that unit something that no amount of orders or speeches or propaganda can communicate. Your commander is willing to face what you face. Your commander believes in what you are doing enough to risk his own life. Your commander is not asking you to do anything he would not do himself. And that Patton knows from 30 years of studying warfare makes men fight harder than any order ever could. He has seen it every time he visits a forward unit, every time he shows up at a battalion command post or walks through a company area or talks to squad leaders about what they saw in yesterday's fight. The effect is immediate and measurable. Units advance faster after he visits, take more initiative, accept harder missions. Their casualty rates drop because they fight smarter when they believe their commander understands what they are going through. The staff at SHAEF sees this as anecdotal, unprovable. Not something that can be quantified or put into a report, but Patton sees it in the numbers. Third Army has advanced further and faster than any other Allied army in Europe, has taken more territory with fewer casualties than staff projections predicted, has consistently exceeded every operational timeline. Is that because of superior planning, better logistics, more aggressive tactics? Maybe, or maybe it is because 400,000 men believe their commander is with them. Patton turns away from the map. His aide enters with the daily intelligence summary. German resistance is collapsing in the Frankfurt sector. Forward units are reporting minimal contact. The road to Chemnitz is opening. So 4th Armoured Division requests permission to advance toward Leipzig. Patton studies the map. Leipzig is 150 miles northeast, deep into territory the staff said would not be reached for another 2 weeks. Tell them yes, and tell them I will be there tomorrow to see how they are doing. The aide writes it down. Does not ask if Patton plans to file a movement authorization. Does not ask if he will notify 12th Army Group. Does not ask because he already knows the answer. Patton will go where his soldiers are, because that is where an army commander belongs. Meanwhile, at SHAEF headquarters in Reims, Eisenhower faces a different calculation. Dwight David Eisenhower, 54 years old. Supreme Commander, Allied Expeditionary Force, the man responsible for coordinating British, American, Canadian and French armies across a front that stretches from the North Sea to the Swiss border, managing personalities like Montgomery and Patton and Bradley and de Gaulle, balancing military necessity with political reality, keeping the alliance together long enough to finish the war. He graduated from West Point in 1915, the same class as Omar Bradley. Spent World War I training tank crews in Pennsylvania, while men like Patton went to France and earned their reputations in combat. By the time he deployed to Europe, the war was over. He learned his lessons differently than Patton. Patton learned that commanders need to be at the front. Eisenhower learned that wars are won by logistics and planning and coordination, by making sure supplies reach the right units at the right time, by ensuring that attacks are synchronized so the enemy cannot shift forces to meet isolated threats, by maintaining the larger vision even when individual battles are being lost. West Point taught him that commanders command from positions where they can see the entire battlefield, where they can make decisions based on complete information, where they can coordinate multiple units without being distracted by the chaos of any single engagement. The First World War validated that lesson. The generals who tried to lead from the front trenches could not see beyond their immediate sector, could not coordinate with adjacent units, could not respond to changing situations across the entire front. The generals who commanded from headquarters, who had telephone lines and radio communications and staff officers providing them with constant updates, those were the generals who won. Eisenhower believes in system, in structure, in protocols that exist because they keep armies functioning when chaos threatens to overwhelm everything. And Patton keeps violating those protocols, not occasionally and not in emergencies, constantly. As a matter of philosophy, last week Patton disappeared for 6 hours, showed up at 6th Armored Division's forward command post 100 miles from his headquarters, did not tell anyone he was going. Just arrived, talked to the division commander about their advance toward Kassel, then left. The week before, he flew in a liaison aircraft to 4th Armored Division, landed at a forward airstrip that was under sporadic artillery fire, spent 3 hours with the tank crews, returned to headquarters in time for dinner like nothing unusual had happened. The week before that, he drove to 91st Infantry Division, walked through their positions with the regimental commanders, got within a mile of active German positions, came back and filed a report about gaps in the enemy's defensive line that intelligence had not identified yet. Every single time, Third Army advances faster than projected. Every single time, casualties are lower than estimated. Every single time, Eisenhower has to write another note for Patton's file about unauthorized movement. And every single time, he knows those notes will not change anything, because Patton genuinely believes a commander's place is with his soldiers. Not in theory, not as inspiration for speeches, but as literal operational doctrine. Eisenhower cannot decide if Patton is the bravest general he has ever commanded or the most reckless. Maybe both. Smith enters his office with the evening reports. Third Army pushed another 20 miles today. Took 2 towns ahead of schedule. Captured 1,500 German prisoners, casualties minimal. Patton visited 11th Armored this afternoon, Smith says. Eisenhower does not need to ask how far that is from Third Army headquarters, does not need to ask if Patton filed a movement plan. Did he at least take a security detachment this time? Just his driver and his aide. 3 men, driving through a combat zone where German and American forces are still shooting at each other, where roadside ambushes happen daily, where a wrong turn could put them behind enemy lines. Eisenhower signs the casualty reports, sets them aside. Make a note, I will talk to him next time he is at headquarters. But Patton is rarely at headquarters anymore. He is always somewhere forward, always visiting some division or corps, always showing up where his soldiers are fighting. And the strangest part, the part that Eisenhower cannot quite reconcile with his West Point training and his belief in systematic warfare, is that it works. Third Army keeps advancing, keeps exceeding projections, keeps performing better than any other Allied army in the theater. Is it because Patton is a tactical genius, because his staff is better, because his soldiers are more aggressive? Or is it because 400,000 men know their commander might show up anywhere, anytime, willing to face the same dangers they face? Eisenhower does not have an answer. But he knows that in 2 days, Patton will disappear again. Will show up somewhere 300 miles from where he is supposed to be, will violate another protocol, will earn another official reprimand, and Third Army will keep winning. That is the paradox Eisenhower cannot solve. The equation that does not balance. The problem that has no clean answer. How do you control a general who is winning? Outside the spring evening settles over Reims. The war room lights stay on. Staff officers work through the night, coordinating the next day's operations. Radio operators maintain contact with forward units. Intelligence analysts process reports from the front. And somewhere out there in the chaos between Frankfurt and the Czech border, George Patton is planning his next unauthorized visit to the men who trust him to lead them. April 14th, 1945. 2000 hours. Third Army Communications Log, a radio transmission, brief. Recorded by the duty officer. I am where my soldiers are. That is where an Army commander belongs. That evening, Walter Bedell Smith writes in his personal diary. Ike spent 2 hours trying to track down Patton today, found him 300 miles from headquarters. Third Army advanced 50 miles beyond projections. Patton earns his 7th reprimand this month. The paradox continues. He is the best field commander we have. He is also the most exasperating man I have ever had to coordinate with. But the real crisis is still coming, because 2 days from now, Patton will not just visit the front lines, he will walk through them, on foot, under direct enemy fire, in the middle of a city where SS forces are fighting house to house. And when Bradley calls Eisenhower to report it, the question will no longer be about protocols or safety or command structure. The question will be whether Eisenhower can stop Patton before he gets himself killed, or whether stopping him would cost the war more than losing him would. April 16th, 1945, 0700 hours. Third Army Headquarters, Frankfurt, Germany. George Patton stands in his command tent reviewing the morning intelligence reports. The night was quiet. 4th Armored Division consolidated their positions near Bayreuth. 12th Corps established control over the main river crossings. 20th Corps pushed forward another 8 miles against minimal resistance. His aide enters with the daily itinerary, a list of meetings, briefings with corps commanders, supply coordination with SHAEF, administrative details that Army commanders are supposed to handle. Patton crosses out everything after 1000 hours, writes in the margin visiting 4th Armored Division. Nothing unusual about that. Army commanders visit their divisions regularly. It is expected, encouraged even, as long as they file the proper movement authorization, as long as they coordinate with the units whose sectors they will be passing through, as long as they take appropriate security. Patton's Jeep departs at 0730. Driver, aide, no security detachment, no filed movement plan beyond 4th Armored Division written in the duty log. By 1100 hours, 4th Armored Division reports that Patton visited their command post, stayed for 20 minutes, asked about fuel supplies and ammunition status, seemed satisfied with their progress. Then he departed, said he wanted to see how the advance was progressing, did not specify where he was going. By 1500 hours, 12th Corps headquarters receives frantic radio traffic from 14th Armored Division. A 3-star general is on foot in the middle of Nuremberg. Nuremberg, the city where the Nazi Party held its massive rallies before the war, where Hitler stood before hundreds of thousands and promised a 1,000-year Reich. Now the city is being cleared block by block, house by house, building by building. 14th Armored Division has been fighting in Nuremberg for 6 days. SS rearguard forces defend from buildings, fire from windows and rooftops, set up machine gun positions in rubble. Every street is a kill zone. Every corner could hide a sniper. Every building has to be cleared by infantry going room to room with grenades and rifles. Yesterday, the division lost 42 men taking 3 city blocks. Today, a 3-star general is walking through those same streets with the assault troops. The division commander gets on the radio himself. His voice is tight, controlled, trying not to sound like he is panicking, even though he absolutely is panicking. Sir, you need to leave this area immediately. We are taking sniper fire from multiple buildings. This sector is not secure. Patton's response is recorded in the division's after-action report. So am I, son. Shoot back. He stays for another hour, walks through 3 more streets with the infantry, watches them clear buildings, talks to squad leaders about their tactics, about how they use smoke grenades to cross open areas, about how they coordinate with tank support to suppress enemy positions before advancing. He sees a sergeant lead his squad through a blown-out storefront, sees them move through the building, hears the grenades going off inside, sees them emerge from the back and signal all clear. 20 minutes later, that same sergeant's squad takes the next building, then the next. They move faster than they did yesterday, more confident, more aggressive, because the old man is watching, because if their army commander is willing to stand in the street while SS snipers are shooting, then they can damn well push through 1 more building. Patton finally leaves when his aide physically insists they need to return before dark. The Jeep drives back through the city, past buildings still burning from yesterday's fighting, past knocked-out German tanks, past American aid stations treating wounded soldiers. That evening, the 12th Corps commander calls SHAEF headquarters. His voice is shaking slightly. Sir General Patton was in Nuremberg today, on foot, under direct fire from SS troops. If the press finds out the 3rd Army commander was in a street fight, there will be questions. Eisenhower's response is not recorded, but Smith's diary entry that night reads, Ike spent an hour on the phone with Bradley. Patton's situation becoming untenable. He is no longer just visiting forward units. He is walking through active combat. Bradley wants him relieved. I am not sure Ike disagrees anymore. 3 days later, 14th Armored Division completes the capture of Nuremberg. Total time 9 days. Staff projections had estimated 15 days. Casualties 30% lower than predicted. The division commander files his after-action report. Buried in paragraph 14, section C, he writes, morale significantly improved following visit by Army commander on 16 April. Subsequent advances proceeded ahead of schedule. He does not mention that the Army commander was under sniper fire. Does not mention that Patton walked through streets where men were dying. Does not mention any of that because it sounds insane when written in an official report. But every soldier in 14th Armored Division knows what happened. They know the old man walked through Nuremberg while the SS was still shooting. They know he watched them clear buildings. They know he stood in the same streets where they were fighting. And they know that if their commander is willing to do that, they can take one more city, push one more mile, accept one more mission. April 18th, 1945, 0900 hours. 3rd Army Headquarters, Frankfurt. Patton's morning briefing covers the operational situation across 3 corps. 20th Corps is pushing toward Czechoslovakia. 12th Corps is consolidating along the Danube. 8th Corps is swinging south toward Austria. The war is nearly over. Everyone can feel it. German resistance is collapsing. Whole units are surrendering without fighting. The question is no longer whether Germany will be defeated. The question is who will get where first. And Patton is acutely aware that British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery is racing him to Prague. Montgomery, careful, methodical, plans every operation in excruciating detail. Never attacks until every supply line is established, every contingency is covered, every risk is calculated and minimized. Montgomery also moves slowly, takes cities weeks after Patton would have taken them, suffers higher casualties because he gives the Germans time to prepare defenses. Patton despises everything Montgomery represents. This morning, intelligence reports that British forces are approaching the Elbe River, moving east toward Berlin. If they maintain their current pace, they might reach Prague before 3rd Army. Might, unless 3rd Army accelerates. Patton looks at the map, studies the distance to the Czechoslovak border, calculates what it would take to beat Montgomery. Then he walks outside to where a Piper Cub liaison aircraft is waiting. Small plane, 2 seats, used for observation and courier duties, not used for Army commanders to fly deep into combat zones. Patton climbs in. By 1300 hours, he has landed at 3 different forward airstrips, each one closer to the Czech border, each one in territory that was under German control 3 days ago. One field was hit by German artillery just 1 hour before Patton's plane touched down. The shell craters are still smoking when he arrives. At each stop, he talks to unit commanders, asks about their advance, about what they are seeing, about whether they can push harder. At each stop, he tells them the same thing. Montgomery thinks he can beat us to Prague, prove him wrong. By 1700 hours, he is back at 3rd Army Headquarters, has covered 200 miles in a light reconnaissance plane, has visited 3 divisions, has landed at airstrips that were under fire within the hour. His pilots are terrified. One of them submits a request for reassignment that night. Does not give a reason, does not need to. Everyone knows. But the effect is immediate. 4th Armored Division, which Patton visited at their forward position, advances 30 miles in the next 24 hours, takes 2 towns that staff estimates said would require another week. 11th Armored Division pushes to the Czech border, establishes positions 50 miles ahead of schedule. 6th Armored Division, hearing about what 4th and 11th did, advances 25 miles on their own initiative, takes objectives that were not even assigned yet. 3rd Army's front line shifts east so fast that chaff cartographers cannot update their maps quickly enough. Omar Bradley calls Eisenhower that afternoon, does not go through normal channels, calls directly. His voice is tight with frustration that he is trying very hard to control. Ike Patton is completely out of control now. What happened? He flew to the Czechoslovak border this morning in a Piper Cub, landed in a field that was under artillery fire just 1 hour before he arrived. My G2 intelligence officer thinks he is trying to beat Montgomery to Prague. Eisenhower closes his eyes, pinches the bridge of his nose. Is he still there? No, he is already back at his headquarters, covered 200 miles in a light reconnaissance plane, landed at 3 different forward airstrips to talk to unit commanders, was back at his command post in time for dinner. His pilots are terrified. One asked to be reassigned. There is a pause. When Bradley speaks again, his voice drops, becomes quieter, more serious. And here is the thing, Ike. Everywhere he shows up, his units accelerate their advance. The 4th Armored took 2 towns ahead of schedule today. His corps commanders are telling me the troops perform better when they know Patton might appear out of nowhere. They push harder, take more initiative. So he is succeeding. He is succeeding by violating every protocol we have for general officer safety. If he gets killed doing this, 3rd Army loses its commander in the final month of the war. Eisenhower stares at the map on his wall. 3rd Army's advance is marked in blue. It extends deeper into Germany than any other Allied formation. Faster advances, more territory liberated, fewer casualties than projections predicted. I will handle it, he says, but he does not know how. Because the fundamental problem has not changed. Patton keeps violating protocols. 3rd Army keeps winning. How do you order a general to stop doing the thing that makes his army the most effective fighting force in the European theatre? April 20th, 1945. An encrypted message arrives at SHAEF headquarters from Washington, from General George Catlett Marshall, Army Chief of Staff, the most senior military officer in the United States Army, the man who promoted Eisenhower, the man who gave him command of the invasion of Europe. The message is brief, pointed. Press reporting 3rd Army commander frequently visits front lines. Confirm theatre command has protocols for general officer security. Advise status immediately. Eisenhower drafts his response carefully, every word measured. 3rd Army commander maintains aggressive schedule visiting subordinate units, measures being taken to improve coordination and communication. Marshall's reply comes back within hours. Measures he disappeared for 8 hours last week without notifying anyone of his location. If we lose Patton to a stray artillery shell or sniper round in the final weeks of this war, you will personally explain that to the American people and to Congress. This is not a request. This is a direct order. Control your subordinate. Eisenhower shows the message to Smith. What are you going to do? Eisenhower does not answer immediately. He walks to his window, looks out over Rars. The city is peaceful tonight. No air raids, no artillery, just a quiet French city in spring. Somewhere out there, men are dying. American soldiers pushing into Germany, fighting house to house in cities like Nuremberg, crossing rivers under fire, taking casualties every single day as the war grinds toward its inevitable conclusion. And somewhere out there, Patton is planning his next visit to those men. How do I control a general who is winning? Eisenhower's voice is quiet. Every time he violates protocol, his army advances faster. Every time he ignores safety regulations, his casualties go down. His men worship him because he is there with them, and I am supposed to order him to stop. Smith has no answer, but Patton's vanishing acts are about to create a crisis that no one anticipated. Because on April 22nd, Patton will not just visit the front lines, he will cross them. And this time, the Germans will know he is there. April the 22nd, 1945. 05:30 hours. 3rd Army Headquarters, Frankfurt. Patton departs before dawn, tells his aide he is inspecting river crossings along the Danube. The Danube River is the next major obstacle in 3rd Army's advance, a wide, fast-flowing barrier between American forces and deeper penetration into Germany and Austria. 12th Corps is preparing to force a crossing within the next 72 hours. It makes sense that the Army commander would want to see the terrain personally, understand the challenges his engineers will face, identify the best crossing sites, normal reconnaissance, expected behavior. By 0900 hours, 12th Corps reports Patton visited their forward command post, asked questions about bridge capacity, about engineer assets, about crossing sites, standard questions, professional interest. Then he continued toward the river, headed for the Regensburg sector where 11th Armored Division is engaged with elements of the German 11th Panzer Division. By 1200 hours silence, no radio contact, no visual sightings, no position reports. By 1400 hours, 3rd Army Chief of Staff is on the phone to SHAEF. His voice is controlled, but there is an undercurrent of real concern. Sir, we have no location on General Patton. Last confirmed sighting was at 12th Corps forward command post at 0900. He indicated he was moving toward the Danube to inspect crossing sites. That was 5 hours ago. We have had no contact since. Eisenhower's voice is carefully controlled. What is the tactical situation in that sector? 11th Armored is heavily engaged with German armor, fighting for every bridge site. The Danube has not been crossed yet in that sector. German forces still hold the East Bank. So you are telling me Patton is somewhere near an active armored engagement at a contested river crossing and no one knows his exact location? Yes, sir. For 2 hours, Third Army staff coordinates a search. Radio operators contact every unit in the Regensburg sector. Forward observers scan for his command vehicle. Reconnaissance patrols keep watch for a 3-star general's jeep. Nothing. And then at 1600 hours the reports start coming in. A reconnaissance team from 11th Armored radios back. Their messages confused, uncertain. Think we saw a 3-star jeep on the east bank of the river. Cannot confirm. Seems impossible. We have not secured the east bank yet. The 90th Infantry Division reports their signals intelligence unit intercepted German radio traffic, a fragment of a transmission mentioning an American general's vehicle spotted in Regensburg on the German side of the river. Down. The 65th Infantry Division reports scouts observed someone matching Patton's description talking to engineers about bridge load capacity, 2 miles ahead of the forward American positions. An air reconnaissance flight reports an unidentified Allied command vehicle in a sector marked as German-controlled on all current maps. Third Army Chief of Staff calls Eisenhower back. His voice is shaking now. Sir, we may have a capture situation. Multiple reports suggest General Patton has crossed the Danube into German-held territory. Bradley gets on the line. He is not asking anymore, he is demanding. If the Germans realize Patton is across that river, they will divert significant forces to capture him. An American Army commander as a prisoner would be worth 10 divisions to their propaganda machine. We need to extract him immediately. Eisenhower's mind is racing through the calculations. If they send forces to retrieve Patton, they reveal to the Germans that someone important is in that sector, draw attention to exactly what they are trying to protect. But if they do nothing, and Patton is captured, the political consequences will be catastrophic. The military consequences will be worse. The 12th Corps commander weighs in on another line. We do not even know his exact location. The east bank of the Danube in that sector is approximately 8 miles of frontage. He could be anywhere. For 2 hours, the most famous American general in Europe has vanished into German-held territory during active combat. SHAEF Operations is preparing contingency plans for a potential capture. Intelligence is monitoring German communications for any indication they have identified a high-value target. Bradley is drafting orders for a combat search and rescue operation. And then at 1730 hours, radio contact is established. Patton is indeed across the Danube, on the German side, and he is not in trouble. He is inspecting a bridge. The 12th Corps communications officer makes contact. His voice is professional, but you can hear the relief underneath. General Patton, this is 12th Corps operations. We have been unable to reach you for 7 hours. What is your current location and status? Patton's voice comes through clearly, calm, matter of fact. I am on the east bank of the Danube, approximately 3 miles upstream from 11th Armoured's position. Found an intact bridge. Germans abandoned it, must have been in a hurry. There is a stunned silence on the other end. Sir, you are on the German side of the river, during active combat operations. Not for long. I am bringing the engineers up now. This bridge can support armour. 12th Corps can cross here at first light tomorrow, instead of forcing an opposed crossing downstream. According to the after-action report filed by 12th Corps engineers later that day, Patton had personally walked across a partially destroyed bridge under sporadic German small arms fire to inspect its structural integrity. When the engineers told him it could not support armoured vehicles, he moved upstream. Along the east bank, through German-held territory, found a second bridge that was intact. By the time 3rd Army staff located him, he had already radioed 12th Corps to redirect 11th Armoured Division to the new crossing site. The Corps commander gets on the radio. His voice carries disbelief and frustration in equal measure. Sir, you crossed into enemy territory without infantry support, without armour support, without authorization. Patton's response is recorded in the radio log. Tell Ike I found him a bridge. The Germans left it intact. 12th Corps can cross at first light. The staff officers at SHAEF received the engineering report 3 hours later. The bridge Patton found can support full armour. The crossing will proceed at dawn with minimal opposition expected. Estimated casualties for an opposed Danube crossing 800 to 1,000 men. Estimated time 3 to 5 days of heavy fighting. Actual casualties using Patton's bridge 47 men. Actual time 18 hours. One unauthorized reconnaissance mission. 750 American lives saved. Bradley, reading the casualty report the next day, writes in his command log, Patton violated every protocol we have, again, and saved more American lives in one afternoon than a week of proper planning would have. How do I discipline a man for that? But that information does not reach Eisenhower until later. In the moment, all he knows is that his most valuable army commander spent 7 hours in German-held territory, out of communication. personally conducting reconnaissance that squad leaders are trained to do. He sits at his desk, stares at the map, at the blue line representing Third Army's front, at the red symbols showing German positions, at the Danube River cutting through the middle of the operational area. Somewhere across that river, Patton is already moving to his next objective, already planning how 12th Corps will exploit the crossing he just found, already thinking 3 moves ahead while Eisenhower is still processing what just happened. Smith enters the office, sets down another report. Bradley wants Patton relieved of command. Marshall is demanding immediate action. The press is asking questions. Eisenhower does not respond immediately. He keeps staring at that map. At the territory Third Army has taken in the last month, at the speed of their advance, at the low casualty figures that defy every projection, finally he speaks. "Schedule my aircraft. I am flying to Third Army headquarters tomorrow morning." Smith looks up sharply. "Sir, I'm going to talk to Patton, in person. This has gone far enough." Because some conversations cannot happen over the radio, some confrontations require being in the same room, looking each other in the eye, and this conversation is long overdue. April 23rd, 1945. 0800 hours, Third Army headquarters, Frankfurt, Germany. Eisenhower's aircraft lands at the Third Army airstrip. He has not done this in over a month, has not personally flown to an Army headquarters to confront a commander, but this cannot wait, cannot be handled through messages or phone calls or official reprimands that Patton signs and ignores. This requires a face-to-face meeting. He finds Patton in his command tent, studying maps of the advance beyond the Danube, planning how to exploit the crossing that opened this morning. 12th Corps is already moving armor across the bridge Patton found yesterday, the bridge the Germans abandoned, the bridge that is saving American lives right now. Patton looks up as Eisenhower enters, stands, salutes. "Ike, did not expect you." "Sit down, George." They sit across from each other at the map table, the same table where Patton has planned every major operation Third Army has conducted since Normandy, the same table where he coordinated the relief of Bastogne during the Battle of the Bulge, the same table where he has rewritten the doctrine for mobile warfare. Eisenhower's face is hard, controlled. This is not a friendly visit. Yesterday you crossed into enemy-held territory without authorization, without security, without notifying your chain of command. You personally walked across a damaged bridge under fire. You were out of radio contact for 7 hours in a sector where German armored forces were actively engaged. Do you understand that you risked not just your own life, but the entire command structure of Third Army? Patton meets his eyes, does not flinch, does not apologize. "I found you a bridge, Ike. 12th Corps crossed the Danube this morning at 0600 hours. They are 15 miles beyond the river right now, a week ahead of your staff's predictions. That bridge I found saved us 3 days of combat and hundreds of American lives. You are not a scout, George. You are an Army commander." "I am an Army commander who knows his terrain. That bridge, your staff said it was destroyed in the initial reports. It is intact. If I had waited for reconnaissance reports to be filed, analyzed, forwarded through channels, and approved, we would still be planning the crossing while Montgomery races us to Prague." Eisenhower leans forward. His voice is quiet now, intense. "Brad wants you relieved of command. Marshall is asking direct questions about your activities. And honestly, George, I am running out of ways to defend you. On April the 14th, you disappeared for 8 hours. On April 16th, you walked through sniper fire in Nuremberg with assault troops. On April 18th, you flew into unsecured forward airstrips in a reconnaissance plane, and yesterday you personally conducted reconnaissance in enemy territory. You are 59 years old, George. You are one of the most experienced commanders in the United States Army, and you are acting like a platoon leader." Patton's jaw tightens. He stands, walks to the large situation map on the wall, points to the blue markers showing Third Army's positions. "And Third Army has advanced further and faster than any other army in this entire theater. We are at the Czech border. We are at the Austrian border. We have liberated more territory in the last 30 days than in the previous 3 months. You want to know why?" He turns back to Eisenhower. "Because when soldiers see their commanding general at the front, not 300 miles behind the lines in some comfortable headquarters, but right there in the mud and the fire with them, they believe they can do the impossible. They do not see an old man in a clean uniform giving orders from safety. They see their commander sharing the risk.
And they fight harder because of it." Eisenhower stands as well. His voice is quiet, but intent. I understand that, George. I do. But you are not just any officer. You are irreplaceable. If I lose you to a random artillery shell or a sniper's bullet in the final weeks of this war, Third Army stops. All of it. 400,000 men lose their commander. 3 corps lose coordination. The entire advance halts while we reorganize command structure.
Is that one bridge worth that risk? Every bridge I find brings us one day closer to ending this war. Every day we save is American soldiers who get to go home alive. Not if losing you costs us a week of operations and 1,000 more casualties while we sort out the command chaos. They stare at each other across the map table. 2 generals, 2 philosophies. 2 men who have fought side by side since North Africa, but cannot reconcile this fundamental disagreement about how wars should be won. Finally, Eisenhower speaks again, his voice softer now, almost tired. George, I have known you for more than 20 years. I know how you think. I know how you fight. You are the best offensive commander in the United States Army, probably the best we have ever had. But I need you to understand something. He points to the map, to the course markers, each one representing more than 100,000 men. You are not commanding a company anymore. You are not commanding a regiment. You are commanding an entire field army. Your job is not to find bridges personally. Your job is to command the generals who command the colonels, who command the majors who send scouts to find bridges. That is how armies work. Patton's voice is steady, certain. And that is why most armies move slowly, because everything goes through channels. Everything waits for approval. Everything gets delayed by procedure. I do not have time for that. We are winning this war right now. Every day we delay is another day the Germans reorganize their defenses. Another day they move resources. Another day this war continues. Eisenhower sits back down. He suddenly looks very tired, older than his 54 years. Brad wants you relieved. Marshall wants an explanation. I have a file of incident reports from the last 2 weeks alone. You have violated protocols that exist for very good reasons. If you were any other general, you would already be on a plane back to the States. But I am not any other general. No, you are not. You are the general who is about to win this war, and I need you to stay alive long enough to do it. There is a long silence, the kind of silence that happens between old friends when they have run out of arguments but have not reached agreement. Then Patton speaks. His voice carries none of its usual confidence. It is quiet, almost reflective. Ike, I have spent 30 years learning how to fight. 30 years studying warfare, training soldiers, preparing for this. I am not going to watch this war end from a headquarters tent 300 miles behind the lines while my men do the dying. Eisenhower stares at him, and for the first time in this entire conversation, he does not have an immediate response. Because buried in that statement is a truth he cannot argue with. Patton is not showboating, he is not glory-seeking. He genuinely believes a commander's place is with his men, in the danger, sharing the risk. And Eisenhower knows, even if he will never say it out loud, that Patton might be right. Finally, he stands, prepares to leave, then turns back one more time. You know what the real problem is, George. You are actually right. Your men do fight harder when you are there. 12th Corps took that bridgehead in half the projected time. 11th Armored pushed 40 miles after you visited. Even Brad admits your units consistently outperform our projections. Your presence makes a measurable difference in combat effectiveness. He pauses. But if you get killed, finding another bridge, Third Army stops. 400,000 men lose their commander in the final weeks of the war. So I am going to ask you one question, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Is that bridge worth that risk? Patton meets his eyes. Every bridge I find brings us one day closer to the end. Every day I save is American lives that get to go home. Yes, that is worth the risk. Eisenhower nods slowly. Then I am going to say this once, and only once. Stop trying to get yourself killed. I cannot win this war without you. But I also cannot explain to George Marshall, to the President, or to the American people why I let the Third Army commander play reconnaissance scout in enemy territory. You want to lead from the front, fine, but take a security detachment. File movement plans, notify your chain of command, stay in radio contact. Can you do that? I will try. Do not try, George. Do it. That is an order. Yes, sir. Eisenhower walks to the tent entrance, stops, does not turn around. For what it is worth, that bridge you found, 12th Corps crossed with minimal resistance. They are advancing toward Linz right now. You saved lives yesterday. Just do not throw your own away doing it." He leaves. Patton stands alone in the command tent, looking at the map, at the blue markers showing Third Army's incredible advance across Germany, knowing Eisenhower is right about the risk, knowing Bradley is furious, knowing Marshall is demanding answers, but also knowing his men are fighting and dying every single day, and he cannot command them from safety while they face danger. He will not. April 23rd, 1945. 1400 hours, Third Army Headquarters, Frankfurt, Germany. Eisenhower's aircraft climbs into the afternoon sky, banking west toward Reims, leaving Patton standing in that command tent with maps and orders and the weight of 400,000 men on his shoulders. The conversation is over. The decision has been made, except it has not really been a decision at all, because both men know exactly what will happen next. Patton will file movement plans, will take security detachments, will notify his chain of command, will stay in radio contact for about 3 days, and then he will disappear again, because his philosophy has not changed, his belief system has not shifted. His certainty that a commander belongs with his soldiers remains as absolute as it was before Eisenhower flew to Frankfurt. The only thing that has changed is that now it will be documented. April the 24th, 1945, 0700 hours, Patton departs Third Army Headquarters. His aide files a detailed movement plan this time, visiting 6th Armored Division at their positions near Amberg. Estimated departure 0730, estimated arrival 1000 hours. Route specified, security detachment assigned, radio contact schedule established, everything by the book, everything proper and correct, and exactly what Eisenhower ordered. He arrives at 6th Armored Division at 10:15 hours, talks to the division commander about their advance toward the Czech border, reviews their supply situation, asks about casualties, professional, expected. Then he continues forward, past the division command post, past the regiment headquarters, all the way to a battalion that is preparing to assault a German position on a ridgeline 3 miles ahead, stays for 2 hours, watches them plan the attack, talks to the company commanders about their approach, studies the terrain with them. The battalion attacks at 1500 hours, takes the ridge with lighter casualties than expected, advances 5 miles beyond the objective because they see an opportunity and they know their army commander is watching. That evening, 6th Armored Division reports to 12th Corps that they exceeded their daily objectives, advanced faster than projected, morale excellent. 3rd Army Chief of Staff files the daily report to Schaeff, notes that General Patton visited forward units, maintained radio contact throughout, returned to headquarters by 1800 hours, does not mention that Patton spent 2 hours with a battalion preparing to assault enemy positions, does not mention that he was within artillery range of German forces, does not mention that he violated the spirit of Eisenhower's order while technically complying with the letter of it. Eisenhower reads the report that night at Schaeff headquarters, reads between the lines, knows exactly what happened. Smith enters his office. Patton filed a proper movement plan today. I know. He also spent 2 hours with a battalion at the front. I know that too. Smith waits. Finally asks the question they are both thinking. Are you going to do anything about it? Eisenhower stares at the report, at the casualty figures that are lower than projected, at the advance that exceeded expectations, at the notation that Third Army units continue to perform above staff estimates. What would you have me do? Bedell relieved the most effective army commander in the European theatre because he cares too much about his soldiers. Marshall might not give you a choice. Then Marshall can fly to Frankfurt and relieve him himself. It is the closest Eisenhower has come to open defiance of the Army Chief of Staff. Smith recognizes the tone, says nothing more, leaves Eisenhower alone with his reports and his maps and his impossible equation. Between April 24th and May 8th, 1945, Patton disappears from Third Army headquarters 11 more times. Each time, he files a movement plan. Most of the time, he takes a security detachment. Usually, he maintains radio contact. And each time, he ends up somewhere further forward than the movement plan specified, closer to the fighting than the security detachment expected, out of radio contact for hours longer than scheduled. Each time, he returns with tactical intelligence that accelerates Third Army's advance. Sometimes it is bridge locations that his staff did not know about. Sometimes it is gaps in German defensive lines that reconnaissance had not identified. Sometimes it is just his presence, his willingness to show up where his soldiers are fighting, to see what they see, to share what they face. And each time, Third Army moves faster than Schaeff projections predicted. The staff officers at Supreme Headquarters stop being surprised, stop filing alarmed reports, stop demanding explanations, because the pattern is clear now, undeniable. When Patton visits a unit, that unit performs better, advances faster, takes fewer casualties, accomplishes more with less. Is it psychological, tactical? Some combination of both. The staff analysts cannot quantify it, cannot put it in a formula, cannot explain it in a way that fits their understanding of how armies work. But the numbers do not lie. Third Army in the final 2 weeks of April 1945 advances 200 miles, liberates more territory than any other Allied army, captures tens of thousands of German prisoners, and does it all with casualty rates 30% below SHAEF projections. Bradley stops calling to complain about Patton's movements, starts calling to ask how he does it, how he gets units to perform consistently above expectations, how he maintains that level of aggression and initiative across an entire army. Patton's answer is always the same. I go where my soldiers are. They know I am willing to face what they face. Everything else follows from that. And Bradley, who commanded a corps under Patton in Sicily, who has known him for decades, who understands him better than almost anyone, can only shake his head. You are going to get yourself killed doing this, George. Maybe, but not today. Eisenhower files 7 official reprimands in Patton's personnel record during the final 2 weeks of April. Each one documents unauthorized movement into combat zones. Each one notes violations of security protocols. Each one is signed personally by the Supreme Commander Allied Expeditionary Force, and each one is read by Patton, signed without comment, and filed away. Smith writes in his diary on May the 1st, Ike signed another reprimand for Patton today, the 7th this month. We both know it will not stop him. The war is ending. Third Army has won every objective we gave them, and several we did not. Patton has proven something that no doctrine manual will ever capture. That leadership, real leadership, sometimes requires breaking every rule we have. April 29th, 1945, morning, Bavaria, Germany. Elements of 3rd Army's 45th Infantry Division and 20th Armored Division approach a complex of buildings outside the town of Dachau. Intelligence reports indicate it is a concentration camp. One of many the Germans operated, but no one is quite prepared for what they find. The soldiers who enter first report back in voices that shake. Describe conditions that seem impossible. Piles of bodies, survivors who look like skeletons, evidence of systematic murder on a scale that defies comprehension. By evening, word has reached 3rd Army headquarters. A concentration camp has been liberated. The conditions are beyond anything encountered before. April 30th, 1945. Morning. George Patton arrives at Dachau, 280 miles from his headquarters. Unannounced, no advance warning to the units on site. Just his jeep pulling up to the camp entrance with his aide and his driver. No security detachment, no filed movement plan, no radio contact schedule. Just a general who needs to see something for himself. He walks through the camp, past the barracks where prisoners were kept in conditions worse than animal pens, past the medical facilities where experiments were conducted on human beings, past the crematoriums where bodies were burned, past the mass graves not yet covered. He sees the survivors, men and women and children who weigh 60 pounds, who can barely stand, who have been starved and beaten and worked until they were no longer useful and then killed. He sees what the Allied forces have been fighting against for 6 years, not in abstract terms, not in intelligence reports, but directly, in person, with his own eyes. One of the survivors, a Polish man who weighs perhaps 70 pounds, approaches Patton through an interpreter, asks him a question. Why did it take so long? Patton has no answer. There is no answer. They came as fast as they could, fought as hard as they could, but for the people in this camp, every day of delay meant more death. He looks at the man, at the thousands of others like him who survived, at the piles of bodies representing those who did not.
We are here now, is all he can say. It is over now. The man nods, walks away. Patton stands there for another minute, then continues his tour of the camp, seeing, witnessing, carrying the weight of what arrives too late, even when you arrive as fast as humanly possible. A reporter who is at the camp asks him why he came personally, why the 3rd Army commander would travel nearly 300 miles to visit a liberated concentration camp when he could have sent representatives.
When he could have read the reports, Patton's response is recorded in the reporter's notes. Every commander should see what we are fighting against, not read about it in reports, not hear about it secondhand. See it, witness it directly, because if you are going to order men into combat, you need to understand exactly what evil they are confronting. He stays for 3 hours, walks through every section of the camp that has been cleared, talks to the liberating soldiers about what they found, talks to some of the survivors through interpreters, then he returns to his jeep, drives back toward headquarters, does not speak for the first 100 miles, just sits in the passenger seat staring at the German countryside passing by, thinking about what he saw, about what it means, about all the fights his army has fought to reach this point. This is why Patton takes the risks he takes, not for glory, not for recognition, not to prove something to Eisenhower or Bradley or Marshall, but because when you order men to fight, when you send soldiers into danger, when you command 400,000 people to risk their lives, you have to understand why. You have to see what they are fighting against. You have to witness the evil they are confronting. You cannot do that from a headquarters 300 miles away, cannot understand it from reports and briefings and intelligence summaries. You have to be there. Have to see it yourself, have to carry that knowledge with you when you make decisions about where to attack next, and how many casualties are acceptable and which objectives are worth American lives. Dachau gives context to everything Patton has done in the last month. Every unauthorized visit to the front, every time he put himself at risk, every violation of protocol, because the stakes were never about bridges or tactical advantage or beating Montgomery to Prague. The stakes were about stopping what he saw at Dachau, about ending a system that could create such places, about fighting an enemy capable of such evil. And you cannot fight that from safety, cannot command soldiers to face that darkness while you remain distant from it. That evening, May 1st, Eisenhower's reprimand number 8 for April is delivered to 3rd Army headquarters. Unauthorized movement to forward areas, failure to file proper movement authorization, violation of security protocols. Patton signs it without comment, files it with the others. Then he walks back to his map, studies the positions 3rd Army has reached, the territory they have liberated, the camps they have freed, the people they have saved, thinks about the cost. The American soldiers who died getting here, the casualties his decisions have caused, the responsibility he carries for every life lost under his command, and he thinks about the alternative. What would have happened if 3rd Army had moved slower, been more cautious, waited for perfect conditions before attacking? If he had commanded from headquarters following doctrine, keeping himself safe while his soldiers faced the enemy, more camps like Dachau would have operated for more days, more prisoners would have died, more evil would have been allowed to continue. That is the calculation Patton makes, has been making every day for the last month. The reason he violates protocols and risks his life and drives Eisenhower and Bradley to distraction, because speed saves lives, aggression ends wars, and commanders who are willing to share the danger with their soldiers inspire those soldiers to accomplish the impossible. May 3rd, 1945. Patton departs 3rd Army headquarters to visit 12th Corps. They are advancing toward the Austrian Alps. 200 miles from headquarters, he does not file a movement plan, does not notify Bradley, does not take a security detachment, just goes, because that is where his soldiers are, and in Patton's mind, shaped by 30 years of preparation and 6 years of war and the images from Dachau that will never leave him, that is where their commander needs to be. The war in Europe ends 5 days later. May 8th, 1945, 2300 hours. All German forces in Europe surrender unconditionally. Victory in Europe Day, VE Day, the end of the war that consumed the continent for 6 years, that killed tens of millions of people, that destroyed cities and nations, and any illusion that civilization was immune to barbarism. When the final accounting is done, when staff officers tally the numbers and cartographers mark the final positions, 3rd Army's record stands alone. They have penetrated deeper into Germany and Czechoslovakia than any other Allied army, American, British, Canadian, French. No one advanced as far as 3rd Army. They covered more than 600 miles in 281 days of continuous combat. From the beaches of Normandy in August of 1944 to the Czech border and the Austrian Alps in May 1945, they liberated 82,000 square miles of territory, an area larger than the combined size of England and Wales. They captured 956,000 enemy prisoners, nearly 1 million German soldiers who surrendered to 3rd Army rather than fight, and they did it all with casualty rates consistently below SHAEF projections. In April 1945 alone, 3rd Army's casualties were 30% lower than staff estimates. The distance travelled by George Patton personally in April 1945, reconstructed from movement logs and radio reports and eyewitness accounts, was approximately 3,400 miles. He visited units during active combat at least 8 documented times, probably more that were never officially recorded. He flew in light reconnaissance aircraft to forward airstrips that were under artillery fire within the hour. He walked through streets where his infantry was clearing buildings under direct enemy fire. He crossed rivers before they were secured. found bridges his own intelligence staff thought were destroyed, conducted personal reconnaissance in enemy-held territory, and every single time the units he visited performed better than they had before he arrived. After the war, in his memoir Crusade in Europe, published in 1948, Eisenhower writes about Patton. "George Patton was the most difficult subordinate I had and the most indispensable. His disregard for his own safety was both his greatest strength and my greatest anxiety. He believed and proved through results that a commander's presence at the critical point could be worth multiple divisions, but managing him aged me considerably." In a 1946 interview, Omar Bradley reflects on Patton's final month of the war. "We spent half our time trying to find Patton and the other half trying to keep up with where his army had advanced. He commanded from the front because he could not stand commanding from anywhere else. He violated every protocol we had for general officer safety, and his army performed better because of it. You wanted to strangle him and promote him simultaneously, usually on the same day." The official reprimands filed against George Patton in April 1945 total 7 separate incidents, each signed by Eisenhower, each filed by Patton without comment. None changed his behavior, because Patton believed with absolute certainty that a commander's place was with his soldiers. December 9, 1945, Mannheim, Germany. George Patton is riding in a staff car with his chief of staff. They are going hunting, pheasant hunting, a day off from the duties of commanding occupation forces in Bavaria. A truck pulls out from a side road. The driver does not see the approaching staff car, or sees it too late, or misjudges the distance. The vehicles collide, not a high-speed crash, just an accident, the kind that happens thousands of times every day. Patton is thrown forward, hits his head on a partition in the car, fractures his spine. He survives the initial injury, is conscious, can speak, but cannot move from the neck down, paralyzed by the impact. For 12 days he lies in a hospital in Heidelberg, gradually weakening, his body failing from the injury and the complications that follow. On December 21st, 1945, George Smith Patton Jr. dies, not from enemy fire, not from combat, not from any of the hundreds of times he put himself in danger during the war. He dies from a traffic accident, in peacetime. 6 months after the war ended, the man who survived 300 combat missions, who walked through Nuremberg under sniper fire, who crossed the Danube into enemy territory, who flew to forward airstrips being shelled by German artillery, who violated every protocol for general officer safety and somehow remained untouched. That man dies in a car accident on a German road. The irony is not lost on anyone who knew him. Eisenhower, when he hears the news, sits alone in his office for an hour, does not speak, does not work, just sits with the knowledge that the most difficult and most indispensable subordinate he ever commanded is gone. Bradley receives the news while meeting with staff officers, excuses himself, walks to his quarters, sits down and tries to process the fact that George Patton, who seemed indestructible, who took risks that should have killed him a dozen times, died in a routine accident. The soldiers of Third Army scattered across occupation zones in Germany and Austria hear the news with disbelief. The old man is dead. The general who showed up at the front, who walked through fire with them, who made them believe they could accomplish anything, gone. Military historians will debate Patton's leadership style for decades. Some will argue he took unnecessary risks, that his disregard for his own safety was reckless, that a commander should not put himself in danger when his death could paralyze an entire army. Others will argue that his presence at the front was precisely what made Third Army exceptional, that his willingness to share the danger inspired his soldiers to perform beyond their limits, that the measurable results prove his approach worked. Both sides have evidence, both sides have valid arguments, both sides are probably right, because the truth about leadership is that it has no single formula, no universal approach that works in every situation with every commander and every army. What worked for Patton would not work for someone else. What Eisenhower criticized him for was the same thing that made him effective. The risks that should have gotten him killed were the same risks that made his army advance faster than any other. Between April 14th and May 8th, 1945, while Eisenhower worried about losing his best general to a random bullet, Patton proved something that no headquarters doctrine could quantify. That leadership is not just about giving orders from safety, that sometimes it requires sharing the danger. Being there. Showing your soldiers that their commander is willing to face the same risks they face every single day. That is what Eisenhower meant on April 23rd, when he told Patton, "You are actually right. Your men do fight harder when you are there." Because they did, measurably, consistently, undeniably. And that is what made Patton both the most difficult subordinate Eisenhower ever commanded and the most indispensable. In 1973, a declassified document surfaces. Eisenhower's private note from April 1945. Patton disappeared 18 times this month. Third Army advanced 200 miles. I wrote 7 reprimands. He signed all, changed nothing. History will judge whether I should have stopped him or enabled him more. I still do not know the answer. 28 years after writing those words, Eisenhower still did not know. But the soldiers who fought under Patton knew their commander was with them. And that made all the difference.